Okay, this video is the one from the advertisement assignment, and what I want to do is introduce you to a new technique for masking elements from their background. I just can't reinforce enough that when you're shooting something to be masked out, you want a contrasting background. If it's a dark object, you want a light background. If it's a light object, you want a darker background to kind of create that contrast, to create that separation. Now this one's a little on the tricky side because notice if we zoom in here, get my mouse and everything working, we have areas that are sharp in focus, but because of limited depth of field, some of the stuff in the background went soft. So we kind of, our depth of field is very shallow. And so elements in the background are soft, like this little nub back here and so on. That's okay, we can deal with that using this technique. And so what I want to do is grab any of the selection tools. It can be the elliptical marquee selection, any of the selection tools. Now, I can grab this. Now let's use the quick selection tool, and we're going to go ahead and use select subject. Now, if you have a defined subject and Photoshop can identify it, this is going to save you a lot of time. Select subject, let's click it. It's worth a shot. There it is. So Photoshop goes in, looks at areas of contrast, and does its best guess to separate it from the background. Now, one thing to know is that because this selection is going to be, there's not going to be any softness to it. So if we kind of look at the selection here, this is what the selection looks like. Remember on layer masks and selections, quick mask selections, the white area is selected, the black area is not, and these are the edges that are brought up. So you can see on here that that should be soft and this should be hard, but everything's equally crisp. But again, we have tools and techniques to deal with that. So with our selection active, we're going to click Select and Mask. Okay, so we're in slightly different dialogue. Notice our tools have gone away. We are a limited set of tools here as well, which is fantastic because that's what we want. We're in the Select and Mask option. And so here, I want to view it, and I want to choose something that makes sense for me. And notice the checkerboard's got white and gray. Well, we have a white background. It makes it a little difficult to see, the difference. So you can do it on black. You can do it on white. Whatever your background is intended to be, you can go ahead and do that. Now, if I do it on black, I can change the opacity of that black. I can make it non-existent with a 0 opacity, or I can make it completely black this way. Find a happy medium or go all the way here. Okay, and so what I want to do is I'm going to keep it at 100%, and that's just the black background. It has nothing to do with our outcome here. And so what I want to do is use some of these tools on the left-hand side to fine-tune what I'm seeing here. And so we have our quick selection tool, which is kind of what we've been using, or similar to. It'll make just a selection. Here's our refine edge brush, our brush tool, our lasso or hand tool to move around, and our magnifier to zoom in and out. Okay, so for right now, what I'm going to do is use the brush tool. It acts just like we were going to paint on a layer mask. So we have a plus and a minus and a brush. We either show or hide, and we use this brush whether the size is bigger or smaller and the hardness is soft or at 100% hard. All depends on what you're trying to select. Remember, if you're selecting an area that's soft, you want a soft brush. You want an area that's harder, like this in the front, you want a harder brush. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lower the hardness down to maybe 11 or so. Okay, and show my brush, and I'm going to go ahead and zoom in. And here, I'm going to say subtract, because if I say add, it's like using black and white paint. Black and white paint. This will be white paint, this will be black paint. So here, I'm using the minus with a soft brush, And I'm just going to go ahead and paint this in the best I can. Now we have the Refine Edge brush that will help us out immensely here in a minute. But let's get this close, a little bit closer than Photoshop did. All right, so I'm just going to go ahead and paint in a lot of this stuff here. Okay, I'm using the space bar to pan around my image, which means, you know, it's zoomed way in. I don't want it to zoom in and zoom out. You know, you can switch the hand tool or the magnifier here as well. Okay, so again, all I'm doing is looking around my image, zoomed way in, trying to find those areas to take off. Here, I definitely want the bottom, so I'm going to zoom back out. I don't want any of this down the bottom, so I'm going to make my brush even bigger. Maybe not that big, but bigger. And I'm going to go ahead and zoom in and erase. Or, I shouldn't say erase because that's destructive. I'm just hiding what is on this layer. You know, again, with the harder edge, I can change the hardness of my brush, you know, a little bit harder. And if you make a mistake, you know, let's say you go in too far like that, it's not painting with black paint. I'm going to add that back in with the plus. So all I'm doing is showing or hiding the contents of this layer, just as if you were doing a layer mask and editing directly on it. Okay, bam, look at that. That's looking good. Okay. Now, if this was going against a white background, you wouldn't really have to worry too much about, you know, being super duper precise, because it might actually blend in to the white background. But we know on the layout that we're going to do is we don't want it to be on a white background. It's a blue background, so it's kind of either kind of a neutral middle value or could even be on the darker side. All right, cool. Perfect. Well, not perfect, but good for now. And so what I want to do is I want to show you that we can go in and refine edges. Now the Refine Edges brush, which is this one right here, doesn't work for everything. It's really good with hair or some areas that might be like slightly out of focus. And so what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and see about the subtract, and let's make it a softer brush. Okay. Cool. And I'm going to go ahead and just paint. All you're going to do is paint around the edge and let it do its magic, which I see no magic happening. All right, why is the magic not happening? Weird. Oh, because it was going too slow. I was going too fast. Okay, so here, again, we're going to add this. We got it set to add. Notice it's changing. Okay, and so take a look at it. We can always go back and refine it again. But it's detecting the soft edge, and it's giving us a softer transition here. And so we'll come back and fine-tune this stuff. But here, this is kind of a softer edge. You know, run along the edge a bit. Again, it doesn't work for everything, and it's not perfect. So I want you to use it and take it in smaller pieces. In other words, let me just go along here and stop. See if it does a good job. If it doesn't, I'm going to undo that. Here it did an okay job, so I'm content with that part. And I'm going to stop there. So notice it kind of actually fades it into the background. And so it's starting to look a little bit more believable. I know you're saying to yourself, it's unbelievable how awesome this tool is. And you are absolutely correct in its awesomeness. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and paint along here. Again, it's going to get to the bottom and it's going to catch up because I'm so darn fast. This little nub right here, we're going to remove that. So I'm just going to grab this tool and I'm going to say subtract, increase the brush size a little bit. And again, I want to make sure I have a softer brush because it's a soft area. So if something is kind of doesn't work out and it's distracting and it's not critical, you can remove it. It's not a problem. So refine edge again. I'm just going to go in here, around the edges. Cool. So you can see it does a pretty good job. It does fall apart in some places. So you just want to work your way around the edge there. Cool. Not bad. Actually, it blends well. If it blends well in the dark background, it should be fine on almost anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and look around with my, brush tool and add stuff back in that it may have taken out. So here, there's like a little piece it took out. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that back in. Make the brush a little on the harder side. Only because I'm working from the inside. I'm going to keep the softness on the outside, but I'm just going to go ahead and make it a little, more solid. Again, I'm zoomed way in. I don't want to have to keep zooming in and out. So I'm just going to keep my, brush like this, or my zoom level like this. This piece right here. Clean that up a bit. All right. Fix that. Get rid of that. So minus little nub up there I don't need. I think there's a little piece of almond in here, so I'm going to grab that. This one, I could go and paint it with a soft paint brush to remove it. Let's try that, just to see how it goes. Soft brush. Not bad. It's funny that these brushes, even though the hardness is 0, it seems not quite as soft as the other paint brushes when we're actually editing the layer mask. Again, if you want to try this, refine edge tool, give it a shot. So, ooh, maybe it's got potential. So I'm going to bring some of that back with the paintbrush. Oops, undo, add it back in. Make it a little bit more irregular. Makes it a little bit more believable. Cool. And use, again, work around your image, check it out, see what the edges are looking like. If they look funky, then you might need to fix it. And you can actually tell when you're zoomed in how things will probably look. Here, a piece on that. I'm going to clean this up here. I'm going to subtract some of that stuff or remove it, hide it. And you can go ahead and repeat this. If you get it into Photoshop and you put it in your layout, you can go ahead and repeat these steps with the refined edges and whatnot. Okay, that looks pretty good. All right, I'm going to soften that up a bit here. Cool. Great. That's probably good enough. Oop, a little missed. Oops. Undo. There. Cool. Zoom back out. And that looks pretty good. One of the final things I like to do with any of these masking situations, just in case there's any like little fringe on the outside, and just kind of tweak the edges just a little bit, is I like to add a little bit of feather. So I'm going to give you a lot of feather. So obviously that's wrong. That's too much feather. So let's go ahead and bring it down, maybe 1 or 2. Let's try 2, see how that goes. Now the key to this approach is we're going to increase the contrast. So you can't change the feather without changing the contrast or vice versa. So here, increase the contrast, make it like, I don't know, like this. Let's say 34 in this case. I might think that feather might be still a little on the much side. Okay, so I'm going to lower that. Here's the original. I'm going to click on this. Here's what the original looked like. And here's what we've got going on. Okay, so far so good, except now we've kind of exaggerated that white line. I'm going to click on Shift Edge, and if I go to the negative value here, I'm going to overdo it. Notice how it encroaches on the edge. It contracts on it. And so we don't want to go too far, but we just want to tighten it up just a bit so it gives us a little bit more realistic edge. Yeah, that's probably pretty good. Cool. So again, before and after, and it cleaned up any of that little white halo. Now it could have exaggerated some of the effects from the refine edge brush, so if you have to, go back in, like here it did. I want to add some of this back in because it kind of made it look a little funky. Add that back in here. So again, I'm just panning around my image, looking for things that really kind of stand out as kind of odd or irregular. Looks super clean up top here. Awesome. And there we have it. So once we have that set, like I said, you can come back to it. What I'm going to do is scroll down the bottom here, and it says Output Settings. So what do I want to do? I want to output it. I don't want a selection because I just have to make a layer mask anyway. I'm just going to add a layer mask to the existing image. Now if you have multiple images that you're going to apply similar settings to, you can say remember settings, and it'll remember, you know, the smoothing, the feather, the contrast, and so on. So that way you don't have to retype that in, at least from the start. Okay, so for this, I'm just going to click on Remember Settings. Why not? Layer, you can say a new layer if you wanted to. So it basically would cut it out and put it on a new layer with layer mask, new document with layer mask. It's up to you. For now, I'm just going to say layer mask. Click OK. And bam, there's our image. Now, I always like to test how it looks against maybe a background that I might use. So I'm going to click this and maybe pick that blue or a blue. It doesn't matter what the color is. I'm going to make a new layer here. And I'm going to do, darken the blue. Pick it up here. You do Edit, Fill, Foreground Color, Change Layer Order, and bam. So here you would definitely be able to see if it needs more work or not. Now you can either take it back into Select and Mask. Again, activating Quick Selection Tool, I can take it back to Select and Mask, or I can actually double click on the layer mask itself, double click, Select and Mask, and now I can start from here. Now since I have a layer, I can say on layers so I can actually see it in context with what I'm working on. You know, so I can go in and soften the edges or whatnot. Remember the settings we used before, since we said remember settings, they're still here. So I can turn those off, you know, if I know that I don't want them, because that will give me double duty. It doesn't remember the settings, it remembers the numbers here, but it doesn't, it already created that layer mask, so it's actually applying these new values or the saved values to the current layer mask. So that may or may not be applicable to what you're doing. So here we can see if it's good enough. If it's not, then we can, you know, feather the edges a bit. And again, if it's in some places just too soft or too hard, you can go in and feather the edges, shift them, you know, in or out as necessary. Okay, click OK, show it all, and collapse that, and now we're all set. So if you're going to do that, I would highly recommend saving your file as a Photoshop document. So File, Save As, and let's save it as a Photoshop document. We can save it as a copy, that's fine. If you have something else in there, let's call this one V2 because it is my version 2. And then Layers and then Profile. Click Save in my Assets folder and you're all set. Okay, so hopefully that was a good way to help mask things out and use those as components in your layout as a composite or whatever you need an image for. Again, saving it as a separate Photoshop document allows you to reuse that in multiple situations, not just the one. Okay, hope this was informative. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a shout, and good luck.